Meets Critics session for the launch of Daniel Carpenter's Reputation and Power, Organizational Image and Pharmaceutical Regulation at the FDA. And I have the book here in its 804 pages of glory. And this is really a remarkable book. I should introduce myself. My name is Jeremy Greene. I'm an assistant professor in the History of Science department and an instructor in the Division of Pharmacoepidemiology and Pharmacoeconomics at the Greene Hospital. I'm also an instructor in internal medicine, associate physician at the Greene Hospital. And the only reason that I'm running off these titles for you is to suggest that my own career is the intersection of the clinical domain, social sciences, history, pharmaceutical regulation, pharmaceutical policy, and yet even someone who sits at these meetings only encompasses a tiny fraction of the spectrum of audiences that this book addresses. I think this is a truly remarkable work, and I'm glad that we're having this time here to start a conversation, which will undoubtedly be a national conversation that will last for an extended period of time, of what the impact of this scholarly work is on these fields of political science, of history, of clinical medicine, of public health, and of science and technology studies. And, Professor Carpenter is, of course, a professor of political science, a professor in the Department of Government. And in some ways, when we take apart that term, political science, it suggests a science of politics. But to study the Food and Drug Administration, to study the bureaucratic organization and trajectory of an institution such as the FDA, is to realize this intersection is not so much merely a science of politics, but an exploration of the politics of science and the politicization of science as well. And for that reason, I think we will tease apart today some of Professor Carpenter's contributions to that space between the qualitative and the quantitative social sciences, to that intersection of science and policy that is the vital heart of science and technology studies. Today, the framework of today's event will involve three commentators from three distinct arenas of which this book has an impact. Professor Sheila Jasanoff, who's the Pforzheimer Professor of Science and Technology Studies at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and director of the STS Circle here at Harvard. Professor Charles Rosenberg, who's a professor of the history of science and Ernst Monrad Professor of the Social Sciences here at the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. And Commissioner Josh Sharfstein, who's a Principal Deputy Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration. And there's a remarkable panel. Each of the panelists will keep their comments relatively brief so that we can have time for a detailed question and answer session following. And this will be preceded by a few minutes of prepared remarks by Professor Carpenter himself, who will introduce the book to those of you who have not had time to read it in full in the less than 1 month of its existence that you're allowed to purchase. Daniel Carpenter, as many of you know, is the Ali S. Freed Professor of Government and Director of the Center for American Political Studies here at the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Harvard. He received his doctorate in political science from the University of Chicago in 1996 and has taught at Princeton and the University of Michigan before his tenure here at Harvard. His primary interest is the theoretical, historical, and quantitative analysis of American political development, public bureaucracies, and government regulation, and particularly within the regulation of health products. I can't list all of the prizes that his work to date has received, but his first book on the forging of bureaucratic autonomy, reputation networks, and policy innovation in executive agencies won the Gladys Camera Prize from the American Political Science Association and the Charles Levine Prize in the International Political Science Association. And I'm sure that Reputation and Power is designed to equal those number of medals, if not exceed it. I find myself thinking of Apollo Anton Ono briefly. Professor Carpenter's work has featured across multiple relevant funding agencies and foundations. He was a Robert Wood Johnson investigator, received the Robert Wood Johnson Investigator Award in Health Policy and Research. Again, I'm not going to detail all of these rules, but I highlight the RWJ because I went back and looked at his original application for the RWJ Investigators Award, which was, I think, nearly a decade ago, and involves starting the research for this book. And so now, here we are at the termination of it, and so I will gladly turn over the microphone to Professor Daniel Carpenter to introduce his new work, Reputation and Power.